Hi all, welcome to my new Unity tutorial video. In this one we're just going to take a quick look at how to use light probes and light maps together to get an effectively lit scene with shadows that doesn't require real-time lighting calculations. Now the reason that I'm doing this video is that I'm currently working on a project where we're porting a scene from PC to Gear VR, which uses an Android device. And obviously, being a mobile device has a lot less computing power, and so we want to rely less on using real-time lighting calculations and shadow calculations, so we can get more performance in other areas, throw more polys around. So here I've just got a really quick scene, really simple scene, just a bunch of different cubes and planes for the ground. They've all just got normal standard materials on them. There's 3 cubes and 3 spheres. I have added a cube which I have unwrapped in such a way that the UVs are overlapping, just so I can demonstrate the lighting artifacts that light mapping will generate if you have overlapping UVs. So you need to keep in mind that when you're creating assets that need to be light mapped, that they need to have non-overlapping UVs, otherwise you will get lighting artifacts on those objects. Okay, just a quick rundown of Unity's lighting window and its different settings that are important. So we've got the environment lighting, go Windows, lighting to get our lighting menu up here. So the things that are important that we want to check out here is, so we have ambient intensity. So you notice as I'm scrolling this up and down that it's changing the ambient light intensity. So that's the amount of light in the scene, in a base level of light that is in the scene. What we want to do is, if we put all that all the way down to 0, that means that the scene is only being lit by the skybox, but the lights that are in the scene as well. So you notice I've got these 3 lights here, so they're all set to real time in their baking settings at the moment. So you'll notice as I move that around, there's real time shadows, real time lighting. So this is what we're going to get rid of, and we're going to make them baked. So let's select these. I'll select these 3 lights and set them all to baked. Okay. Now in the lighting menu here, we have pre-computed real-time GI. Now, we don't want to use that in this case, but what it does is it bakes in the real-time bakes in the global illumination. So that's light bouncing around off objects onto other objects. That helps objects look seated in the scene, and it looks more realistic. We're not going to use that in this case because we don't want to run real-time GI on an Android device. We do, however, want to have baked global illumination. So we're going to create baked global illumination. You notice when I ticked that this blue bar at the bottom here started running, and the lighting in the scene changed. Now that's because auto is ticked down the bottom here, and auto means that it's going to automatically build new light maps every time we change a setting to do with the lighting in the scene. So I'm going to actually turn auto off for now, and I'm going to come down to build, the little arrow next to it, and click clear baked data. So that just gives us a look at the scene now without the baked data, and it'll stop it trying to automatically build light maps as we update settings. So we'll set all the settings first, then we'll get it to build the light maps. Now, we have baked GI here, so you can set the resolution in pixels per unit. You can set the padding, a bunch of different other options that don't really matter to us so much yet. And we can set the ambient occlusion as well. So I'm going to set ambient occlusion up to just 1 at the moment. And there's a bunch of other different options here at the moment. Let's have it. You can choose your atlas size as well, so you can choose the size that the baked global illumination texture will be. Now, in my case, we're trying to keep the texture use down because we want fast scene loads. So if we have lots of large textures, as we load a new scene, it's going to be a performance hit or a time. Take longer to load the scene if there's more textures. So I'm trying to create a scene here where we're using a mix of light maps and light probes with the aim of trying to keep load times down, so the amount of texture use down, as while providing a realistic looking lighting. Okay, so I'm going to leave the atlas size at 1024 for the moment. We've got general GI, different modes here, which you can go through. Bounce, boost, and indirect intensity, so that's how much the light bounces around. Okay, now there's also the settings here. I'm going to set it to very low resolution just for the moment, just while we're doing the tutorial video, so it's quicker to bake and build. And then there's a bunch of fog settings and a few other bonus settings there. All right, now if I click build at the moment, not a whole lot is going to happen because we've only got 3 objects set to static. So, and actually, I'll cancel that. I'll clear our light map data and I'll make sure these objects aren't on static and just show you what happens. Okay, now because I hit build here, now you'll notice that not much is happening here. So it's just made our scene really dark because we have no ambient intensity of light. It's doing this baking reflection probes and stuff here. And once it's done, it will import all of these and you'll get a folder in the same folder that your scene is saved into, and that will hold your light map data. I'll give you a look at that in a sec once this finishes importing. Yeah, it's getting there. Okay, cool. All right, so we have a scene here which is entirely unlit. So if I move my lights around, you'll notice nothing's happening because they're set to baked, but none of this lighting information is baked. Now the reason that is because none of these objects are set to static yet. So what you want to do is make sure that any objects that you want light maps baked for are set to static. Now, so if I just do it on the ground here and on these 2 walls and I hit build, we'll notice that when it does the lighting calculations this time round, that you will actually see the lighting effects on those objects. You can see here it's telling you what it's doing. It's baking direct light, baking indirect light. Okay, cool. So you can see here, now I'll actually show you in the, so you can see here that we have lighting on this wall. So we can see from lighting from the blue light there, some bleed from the red light. Now, obviously this is set to low resolution. So at the moment you can see, it's quite artifacty. There's a lot of compression and, large pixels there. You would probably bump that up and change it to a higher resolution for a final build. But for the reasons of this tutorial and making it quick, I'm just going to keep them at low for the moment. So it's importing the reflection probes. Okay. Now again, because this is all baked, I move this light, nothing's going to happen. All those shadows are now baked. So if we look in our lighting window over here and we can select light maps, we can see the different light maps that it's baked here, which store our lighting information. So you can see it's red and blue. So what it's done is it's taken the objects that we've baked and packed them all into this one texture at the moment. Now, if you have a lot of objects that are being baked, you're going to end up with a lot of textures. So what you want to do is try and make sure that you're only baking light maps for objects that need to have light maps baked for them. Now, what you can do aside from just using light maps is you can use what are called light probes. Now, light probes capture the lighting conditions at certain areas of your scene, and then when you have an object that is moving around that scene, it references the closest light probes to get the lighting information. So it's not calculating the lighting in real time, it's just looking up the closest probes and figuring out what the lighting conditions are at that scene, which have already been pre-baked. So to do that, what I've done here is I've created a bunch of light probes, which I'll just turn back on. And this is the light probe group. Creating light probes is quite easy. I'll just show you how to create a new one. If you right click, go to light, we want to go to light probe group. And you'll see here it gives you these 8 points. And you can treat them the same as any other object. You can duplicate and move, or you can, it's got this interface here where you can go select all probes, duplicate selected, and move them around. Now you'll notice here that as I'm doing that, it's creating this mesh, this volume, and that volume is the area that if objects are moving through it, they will reference the adjacent light probe. So what I'm going to do is I'll leave these light probes on, and now if I go back to my lighting window and hit build, you'll see these light probes will change to show the light that they've sampled at different areas of the scene. I'll just give that a second to bake. And now import the light maps. If you do have a large complex scene, obviously baking can take quite a while. It will happen in the background as a background process. So other than the importing of the light maps, it will go on in the background and allow you to still work in the scene. At the moment, obviously, because importing, I don't have access to my scene. Okay, now you can see here this light probe group, when I click off it, that it has gone, okay, I'm this light probe here, and I am sampling the light at this section. So there's red light coming from here. There's a little bit of red bouncing off this wall onto that. Over here, you can see this has got more of the blue light. So now if I select one of my objects, and under Mesh Renderer, if it has use light probes ticked, if it doesn't have use light probes ticked, you'll notice, because there's no real-time lights in the scene, it's not being lit at all. If I tick use light probes, you'll notice that as I move it through the scene, it's creating these yellow lines. So it's showing you which light probes it is getting its information from. So I'm just going to move that through the scene, and you'll notice I get over this area, it goes blue because it's getting lighting information from those blue ones. Over here it will go red. Now obviously, this is not generating shadows, as you can see, and it is not receiving shadows. So these are the trade-offs that you need to make about whether you want to use real-time lighting, light maps, or light probes. Now, what I'm going to do here, though, is you'll notice that these light probes up the top here, also, hang on, let's take this sphere, and let's move it into this wall. Now, it would seem that you would want this to appear as if it had more shadow, because the shadow is kind of coming down at this angle here. But because these light probes here aren't in that shadow, and this is sampling from some of those light probes, it's not quite getting the shadow that I would want it to get at that point. So what I would do is grab this light probe group, and then I would scale it down a little bit. I've still got some probes in there, I won't worry about them for the moment. Move them down. So essentially what I want to do is increase the vertical resolution of these light probes so it has more lighting information to draw from on areas where it's transitioning from shadow into light. So at the moment I'm just going to do it across the whole scene. So I'm just going to duplicate this group, move it up. There you go. Obviously, more light probes, the more work it's going to have to do. But usually I'd probably put more light probes in areas where it's transitioning from shadow to light. But for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm just going to do it across the entire scene. Okay, now I'm going to hit build again, but what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to turn these cubes, I'm going to turn this cube here, which is the one with the overlapping UVs, onto static so I can show you the artifacts that the light maps produce. But also what I'm going to do is, well, this cube here, say this cube is not going to move, I would still like to get the shadows from that, so I'm going to set that one to static as well. And I'm going to set this sphere to static, this cube to static. Well, actually, if you have a look, this cube here, because it's not necessarily receiving any shadow, it's in an area of shadow, but the light probes are too, so it's getting good shadow information from the light probes. Because of the shadow that it's casting, or it won't actually be casting a shadow, because this light map is already in shadow here, I'm going to actually leave this turn static off on that one and just let it use the light probe information instead. So the trade-off there is that if I have this object here and it's already being sufficiently lit by the light probes, and it's not generating any shadows which will be visible on the light map because this area is obviously still in shadow, and it's not receiving any significant shadow, then I can get away with just using light probe data and save texture space on the light map. So the trade-off is you have less textures to load while you're still getting good lighting information from the light probes. So what I'm going to do now, so same goes for this sphere here and this one. They don't need to be static because, again, they're in areas where they're already in shadow and the light probes are in shadow, so they're getting good lighting information from that, but they're also not generating any significant shadows. Now, this one here probably would be generating shadow, so I'm going to turn that one to static because you'd think the shadow would come out here a little bit, and so would this one. So that's one set to static, and let's set this guy to static as well. All right, so let's bake. Obviously, the more objects that you're baking, the longer that it's going to take. Yeah. Come on, little machine. All right, I'm getting import. Now, remembering also that you're only setting objects to static when they're not going to be moving in the actual game or your experience, because if they are going to move, have a look here. So if I grab this cube and go, hey, let's move, you'll notice obviously with the shadow that's baked there, let's see, with the shadow that's baked there, it's not going to move. So obviously only set objects to light map to static, sorry, if they're going to not be moving in the actual experience. So you'll see here, this is the cube which has overlapping UVs. Now what's happened is because it's generated lighting for one section of the cube, then it's gone to do the section that has the overlapping UVs. You have glitchy light map data. So again, make sure any objects that are receiving light mapping have unique UV sets. I'm going to delete that for now. And you'll see here now, because I've got plenty of vertical resolution in these light probes, that this sphere here will appear as if it's kind of coming into light, into and out of shadow much more neatly than it would otherwise. Okay, that about covers everything that you need to know for using light probes and light maps in conjunction with one another. Feel free to ask any questions. You can see here, so we've ended up with a 1024 light map, two 1024 light map textures, which is pretty reasonable to be loading on a mobile device. So we'd probably bump this up to 2048, give it a little bit more resolution, and could probably squeeze a few more objects in there as well. Cheers. Thanks for listening. Ask any questions, any comments, feedback, and please share around. Thanks.